Hello and welcome to Philosophy Vibe, the channel where we discuss and debate different philosophical ideas. Today we'll be looking into the theory of absurdism. Interesting. Now, absurdism is a philosophical position put forward by the writer Albert Camus. Camus in fact did not consider himself a philosopher, just a writer. However, in his books The Outsider, The Plague, and his essay The Myth of Sisyphus, he did in fact put forward absurdism to describe the human experience. Broadly speaking, absurdism falls under the existentialist movement, although Camus himself did not actually agree with this label. In short, absurdism notices the fundamental conflict in the human experience. As humans, we have a desire to find inherent purpose and meaning in life. However, we ultimately live in a meaningless world, devoid of any purpose or reason. This is the juxtaposition, the two opposing and incompatible ideas. We live looking for meaning in a universe that is silent, that cannot offer any meaning or purpose. This is the absurdity we must live with. I see. The term absurd refers to two incompatible ideas being put together. If, for example, we refer to a man as a law-abiding citizen, but at the same time this man is a thief and regularly breaks the law, then this would be an absurd claim. Correct. So absurdism comes about due to our contradicting nature in the universe. Camus claims that there is nothing absurd in our innate desire for meaning, and there is nothing absurd in the chaotic, meaningless universe. The absurdity arises when we put these two ideas together. Man's innate instinct to find meaning and purpose in an inherently meaningless, purposeless, and outright irrational universe is absurdity. We build values and morals, we project oughts on the world and believe the world ought to be a certain way and we ought to behave a certain way. However, there is no fundamental values. The universe is just made of matter and energy. We are just particles and cells, and so the values we instinctively hold actually mean nothing. They do not even exist. Yes, I understand. This is a very hard truth to acknowledge, as ultimately it is going against our basic instincts. People see this realism as a form of nihilism, the discovery that there is no grand truth, no God to give life an inherent value or meaning. However, Camus is not necessarily saying there is no meaning or value, but rather we have no way of knowing. We cannot know any of the answers to these questions, so we must live and act as though they do not exist. The only thing we can accept is that in which we have experience of, and all we have experience of is the absurd world. Absurdity is the only certainty. Okay, so once we realize the absurdity of the human experience, then what? How are we to live with this understanding? Good question. Camus noticed that in life people often do come to this absurdist realization. We sometimes get into the habit of life, we live our routines, we go through the motions, and sometimes we feel like we are just mindless drones. It is at this time we ask ourselves, what is the point? Why am I here and why should I carry on? This begins the absurdist realization. Now, people have different ways of dealing with it. One way in which the most severe nihilist will take would be suicide. A life devoid of any purpose or meaning is one that they cannot live with, so they would rather not live at all. However, Camus challenged this approach. He did not agree with it, and he asked, does a meaningless life mean that life is not worth living? Other people turn to faith, often described as a leap of faith. These would be the religious people who will have faith in the existence of God. Even though they have no experience or evidence of God or any meaning, they will still believe. They will still have faith. Again, Camus challenged this. He saw this as a form of philosophical suicide, blind faith in something that is not there to see. Right. Camus instead developed the concept of the absurd man. There are three facets to the absurd man. Number one is revolt. When we face the absurd, it will initially lead one to either suicide or philosophical suicide. They will not be able to handle the absurdist truth and they will try to escape it. But the absurd man revolts against this instinct. The absurd man accepts the absurdity of life and lives with it. The absurd man accepts that the world they live in is devoid of any purpose or meaning, but still carries on living with the innate desire to find one. The absurd man is conscious of the conflict, aware of the contradiction, and accepts it, and lives with it. By committing actual suicide or philosophical suicide, all this is an attempt to escape the absurd. Even the existentialist position of trying to create your own meaning out of life is still an attempt to escape the absurd. It is not acceptance. The absurd man revolts against this. He accepts and lives with the conflict, lives with the juxtaposition, and lives with the absurdity. I see. The second facet is freedom. The absurd man accepts their freedom. They know that they have no fate or great destiny. They also do not try to create their own role. They do not give themselves a purpose to fulfill. The absurd man embraces freedom. They take each moment as it comes. They live in the now. Okay. And the final facet is passion. The absurd man approaches the world as amoral. They see no universal values, and they understand that with no values, there is no reason to do one thing over another. So instead, they build a life of quantity. By quantity, Camus means a life full of passion. To fill up life with as many great moments, fill it up with passion and pleasure. Very interesting. Camus gives examples of the type of people living the absurd life. One is the serial seducer who spends his time sleeping with many women. He is not looking for love or commitment or anything beyond the pleasure of the moment. The other is the great actor who is only concerned with fame in this life. Unlike writers who look for everlasting fame in their work after death, the actor knows they will only have short-term fame on earth, so they live for the here and now. There is also the conqueror, who forgoes any promise of an afterlife, but chases his passion to conquer the world in this lifetime. Yes, this makes sense. And finally, Camus uses the analogy of Sisyphus. Camus uses Sisyphus as the absurdist hero, and even titles his essay on absurdism as The Myth of Sisyphus. Now, Sisyphus was an ancient Greek mythological character. Without going into too much detail, the story goes that Sisyphus cheated death twice. When Sisyphus first died, he descended to the underworld, but managed to capture death itself and chain it up so no humans could die from here on. He then went back up to earth. Eventually, death was set free. When Sisyphus died a second time, he went back to the underworld, but this time he met with Hades, the lord of the underworld. He managed to convince Hades to let him back up to earth again because his wife had not performed the correct rituals and sacrifices for his death. Working on the promise that Sisyphus would correct this and come back down to Hades, he allowed Sisyphus to go back to earth. Sisyphus, however, did not keep his promise and did not return to the underworld, but instead he lived a long life to an old age on earth. When he eventually died again, Zeus now intervened, as he was angry that Sisyphus had escaped death twice. As punishment for his actions, Zeus condemned Sisyphus to an eternity of pushing a large rock up a hill. Sisyphus would push this very heavy rock all the way up the hill, and when it reached the top, the rock would just roll back down to the bottom of the hill. Sisyphus will run down, grab the rock and start all over again, this constant struggle over and over for eternity. Great story, but why does this make Sisyphus the absurdist hero? Firstly, Camus explains that Sisyphus has a hatred for death, a disdain for the gods, and a passion for life. He lives how he wants, he lives for the moment and does not think past it. This is how the absurdist man should live. Right. But more so, the struggle that Sisyphus goes through, the pushing of the rock up the hill, this represents the struggle of the human experience. Life is a constant struggle. We cannot avoid or deny it. We are all pushing the rock up the hill, even though it will roll back down. We will chase it and we will carry on. There's no reason, there's no meaning, there's nothing. Just the constant struggle. However, Camus imagines Sisyphus running down the hill for a brief moment, free from the labour. At this moment, Camus suggests that Sisyphus will become aware of the absurdity of his eternity, pushing a rock up a hill only for it to roll down again. No purpose, no reason, just meaningless repetition. If, like the absurd man, Sisyphus accepts his eternal struggle, acknowledges that this is how he will be spending his eternity, that there is no such thing as anything better or anything preferable, then he will come to see that he is no longer being punished. Sisyphus's eternity is only tragic if he believes that there is a better alternative. If Sisyphus hopes for something greater, hopes to be reprieved, then his eternal struggle is devastating. However, if Sisyphus does not expect anything more, then Camus claims one must imagine Sisyphus happy. If happiness is real, we must be able to find it in life, not in faith or outside our immediate experiences. If happiness is true, it must be found in the absurd. So, like Sisyphus, if we accept the absurd, accept our constant struggle and our constant conflict, we too will find happiness in the absurd. A truly fascinating look on life. I think everyone at some point goes through an absurdist line of thought. However, as a philosophy, I feel there are some fundamental problems. What's that? I understand the absurdist rejection of faith, but I feel absurdism itself relies on faith, or you can say negative faith. What do you mean? Well, absurdism relies on the claim that there is no God, there are no objective values or meaning to life. This is a type of negative faith. It is faith in the non-existence of these things, because should life have an inherent meaning or value, or should there exist a God or deity, then the absurd position becomes null and void. So, the absurdist must take a leap of faith themselves, and hold that there is nothing more to life than what we immediately perceive. I do not know if I agree with that. Firstly, I would object to the existence of negative faith. To have faith means to believe in something, and to believe in something means you should prove that that something exists. You cannot prove a negative, and so the burden of proof should be on the one making the claim. This is very much the absurdist position. It is not a strict solid belief that there is no God or meaning or purpose, but rather we cannot ever know if these things exist, and so we should not live by them. But there is a difference between saying we do not know and saying we cannot know. Saying we do not know is a comment on reality. I do not know that God exists. Fine. Saying I cannot know, this seems like a belief. How can one possibly know that we cannot know the existence of God or the meaning to life? If you hold that we cannot ever know, either as a collective species or as an individual experience, then I'm sorry, this to me is negative faith. And then I think the falsification principle can come into effect at this point. For the absurdists to hold on to this position, I would ask them, is there any situation, any event, anything that you could witness that would get you to change your position? Is there anything that you could experience that would lead you to believe that there is a God, or that there is meaning, or that there is objective value in life? Is there anything personal or universal that would show you a greater purpose to life? If the answer is no, then the whole absurdist position becomes meaningless. If there is no possible or hypothetical scenario that would lead the absurdist to see value or purpose in life, if there is nothing that can falsify the absurdist position, then discussions around absurdism become meaningless. I see. Absurdism then becomes a shallow philosophical position, one that does not go beyond immediate experience, and everyone who has dealt with any philosophical investigation knows that there is more to our life than what we immediately perceive. This is just a form of naive realism and will lead us solely into hedonism. No deep thought or inquiry is then required. And what happens when we discover that our senses do not give us the true representation of what is really there in the external world? What happens when we discover that what we immediately perceive comes with errors and falsehoods? More is needed. I understand that Camus does not consider himself a philosopher, and that is fine, as I would argue that absurdism is too simplistic and shallow as a theory for a serious philosopher to adopt. Very well. If you would like the script to this video, it is part of our Existentialism ebook available on Amazon. This is a great compilation of scripts. It covers the videos for Kierkegaard, Nietzsche and Sartre, so definitely worth a read, and of course you will be helping support the channel. The link is in the description. But that's all the time we have for now. Thank you for watching, we hope you enjoyed the vibe, and what are your thoughts? Who out there is an absurdist? Who lives and embraces the absurd life, and are you happier because of it? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and share, and for more philosophical debates, please subscribe to the channel. Take care, and we look forward to seeing you all soon. Bye bye.